What's up guys, Agent here again with another PTS video, and today we're going to be able to finally test Zen's Redress. This is one of the new light armor sets that's being released with Scale Breaker in next week. ZOS has finally managed to fix the set so it actually works as intended. However, it has been nerfed since its initial release on PTS patch 5.1.0. It is a little bit weaker, actually significantly weaker than it used to be. So in this particular video, we're not going to be really exploring just how effective it is. Generally speaking, you guys should be able to know just based on the previous video, yesterday's video, as well as the total amount of damage taken bonus, that this is going to be pretty similar to Martial Knowledge when it comes to how much damage it can provide. It's just going to be a little bit easier to sustain that sort of additional damage taken, mainly because the proc condition is not quite as stringent as it is on Martial Knowledge. So this video, we're really going to be taking a look at what actually procs Zen's Redress. So it just basically states, for those guys who are not familiar with the set itself, this is a new set. It comes from, I believe it comes from Fane of Marsalok, Lair of Marsalok. Yes, it does. It's light armor set lair. So the 2-piece adds magicka regen, 3-piece adds spell damage, 4-piece adds max magicka. The 5-piece, your light attacks apply the touch of Zen on enemies for 20 seconds. Enemies with the touch of Zen take an additional 1% more damage for each damage over time effect you've placed on them, up to 5%. You can only receive the benefit from 1 touch of Zen per enemy. So what this basically means is that once you have all 5 dots going, you'll be able to get 5% additional damage taken debuff on the enemy. And then this will stack with minor vulnerability. It will stack with the martial knowledge debuff as well. So for those guys who have watched the previous video looking at martial knowledge, you will know that this is basically the same amount of effective damage taken debuff that martial knowledge provides, just with a different proc condition. In this case, you need to have 5 damage over time effects active on an enemy in order for Zen to work. Now, you will also notice that the last line there, you can only receive the benefit from 1 touch of Zen per enemy. What I interpret this as, and I believe other people have tested this, is the fact that you can only have 1 touch of Zen active, basically, at a time. And you can only benefit from that 1 touch of Zen per enemy at a time. Actually, no. Sorry, I worded that incorrectly. You can only receive the benefit from 1 touch of Zen per enemy. Basically, that means that there's no point in having 2 touch of Zens active. So if you have 2 different people running touch of Zen, then you will not benefit from both sets. Basically, they do not add together to get 10%. You only get the benefit from that initial 5% and no more than that. That's what that last line is basically saying there. So this is a set that a lot of people are taking a look at as a potential magicka support set. So for example, if you are running a magicka DPS, one of your DPS might be running Zen's Redress instead for the additional 5% damage taken. Now that is of course dependent on which damage over time abilities you have. Some classes will be in a better position to maintain that 5% additional damage taken than other classes will. Generally speaking, Zens will only proc on single target dots. So, for example, we're going to go ahead and start here. So we do have Zen's Redress active, so our light attacks are dealing 4563 on a non-crit. So if we decide to go out and shoot out a Mystic Orb, which is a damage over time, our light attacks still deal only 4563 direct damage. And part of that is because even though it is a damage over time effect, it is not being applied to the enemy. And you'll see the same thing with Blockade here. Again, 4638. That's what you see with the normal hit, but once Blockade goes away, we're still hitting 4638. And again, that's because Blockade and other area of effect dots, they are not necessarily dots that are applied to an enemy, they're applied over an area. So things like Liquid Lightning, Blockade of Fire, Winter's Revenge, those do not end up proccing Zen's Redress. Instead, you will have to have single target dots instead. So again, we're going to go back to combat. 4638 here. If we decide to go ahead and use Soul Trap, our light attack damage goes up to 4677. And if we add in Degeneration, our light attack damage goes up again to 5094. So you can see here that, and then Soul Trap runs out here, so 50, 51, and then Regeneration, and we have 5009. So you can see here that's pretty much how Zen's Redress works. It needs to be single target dots. Basically, it needs to be an effect that is applied on the Atronak. Now there is one ability here that's a little bit odd when it comes to how it counts for Zen's Redress, and that's going to be Scalding Rune here, which is under the Mage's Guild line. This is technically an AoE damage over time because it does, you do throw down the rune as you can see there. However, as you will see in just a second here, 4638 goes off. You can see here that our damage, again, a normal hit here, is 4677. So, Scalding Rune is one of those interesting ones, and the main thing you need to basically take a look at is whether or not it applies a debuff on the enemy. So, Scalding Rune, if you guys take a look at the Shrendar, you can see when it goes off you have the Scalding Rune debuff, so that counts towards Zen. Soul Trap has one, Degeneration has one, even something like Rearming Trap has one, or in this case Barbed Trap. Barbed Trap would count for that. However, Mystic Orbs doesn't have a debuff, Blockade doesn't have a debuff, Bane doesn't have a debuff, Flame Reach has a debuff, so that would count towards Zen's Redress. Generally speaking, the rule seems to be if it applies a debuff, via Shrendar or via combat metrics, it'll count towards that additional 1% damage from Zen's Redress. So, as you can see here, on a typical magicka DPS spec, you'll typically be running Soul Trap, Degeneration. You'll also typically be running Rearming Trap, Barbed Trap I should say. And then from there, it's really going to be dependent on class. So at the very least, all magicka classes will be able to get at the very least 3% damage taken. Some classes are able to use things like Flame Reach or Scalding Rune, so that will give you up to your 5%. Some classes do have single target dots, so for example, magicka Wardens do have Fetcher Infection, which counts as a single target dot. So that would count, so then in that case magicka Wardens would have a 4%, and then you just need to add in something like Flame Reach or Scalding Rune in order to get that last 5% there. Same thing with magicka Templars, they have Vampire's Bane. Now magicka Necromancers, where, you know, for example, your Skeletal Mage, because there's not a debuff that's applied to the enemy, that won't count as a single target dot, even though technically it is considered a single target damage over time ability. So that's pretty much how Zen's Redress works, and it is something that I would recommend magicka DPS potentially taking a look at getting. It's definitely going to be more for magicka DPS, mainly because healers, you're not really putting any sort of damage over time effects, second target damage over time effects on an enemy. So it's probably going to end up being more for a magicka DPS in order to, you know, wear Zens in order to get that additional damage there. Now, a lot of high-end groups do not run magicka DPS. A lot of high-end groups just run pure stamina DPS. So for those groups, it remains to be seen whether they'll be using Zens on a magicka DPS. Perhaps the additional damage that you get from Zens will outweigh the loss of DPS from running a magicka tune instead of a stamina tune. It still remains to be seen. But for most other guilds that have either a mix of magicka or stamina or run all magicka, Zen's Redress is definitely a set that I would consider putting on one of your classes, probably a Templar or a magicka Warden if you have one of those two classes there. And magicka DKs as well are also a pretty good option to wear Zen's Redress, because a lot of their dots, Engulfing Flames and Burning Embers, those count as single target dots for the purposes of activating Zens. So DKs, Templars, and Wardens are probably the top 3 choices that I would put Zen's Redress on. So that is it for this video. Hope you guys found this informative. Let me know down in the comment section below if there is any other last minute things you would like me to test on the PTS. I do have, at the very least, 1 or 2 more videos coming out. At the very least, I'm taking a look at Axe versus Greatsword on the front bar for two-handed builds. Then I might be taking a look again at the bow builds to see whether anything has changed there. I'm probably going to be taking a look at Master's Maelstrom setups with basically no Monster Helm sets. So again, hope you guys found this video informative, and I'll see you guys in the next dungeon.